Welcome to the Fundamental Principles in Action. In these short videos, we are exploring some of the practical questions that have come up about applying the fundamental principles in our Red Cross work. The fundamental principles are the agreed ethical standards for principled humanitarian response. Now, I say that almost every time you'll have seen me in person. I always say this, and I'll say it again. Red Cross, Red Crescent movement is a unique interaction, a unique dynamic between, on the one hand, principled humanitarian response, and on the other hand, the legal frameworks that can protect vulnerable people in humanitarian emergencies. And together they form this powerful and unique identity of the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. And so if we want to investigate a bit further about what this principled humanitarian response comprises of, then that immediately leads us to the fundamental principles. But for ethical standards and to put ethical standards into practice, you need to know the relative weights of the standards that you're working with. And so we know that in terms of the fundamental principle, they're not all equal. Perhaps surprisingly, it might be surprising to discover they're not all equal. That in fact, there are two that are more important because they express the entire purpose of what we're about, why we exist. And those two are humanity, the alleviation of human suffering and the promotion of human dignity, and impartiality, which comprises of three elements: about getting assistance to where the need is greatest, about non-discrimination, and about exclusion of personal bias. Neutrality and independence, by contrast to those top two, neutrality and independence are the tools that we use to achieve the purpose of humanity and impartiality. And then the other three principles, you may recall, are the way that we are organized. They are unity, universality, and voluntary service. So we turn to the question for this video, which is around whether the principle of independence means that we should not partner with faith-based groups, and we shouldn't even let out our spaces to faith-based groups. And this question, like the other questions we're exploring in this video series, has arisen in several different ways. And so there's a bit of unpicking to do here in the response to this question. But in answer to the question, a short answer to the question, and let me repeat it again, does the principle of independence mean that we should not partner or even let out space to faith-based groups? The short answer is no. There are 2 points to make about the faith-based thing, and then 2 points to make generally about this question. The first point to make is about practice. Sharing spaces both ways between Red Cross and faith-based groups happens around the world, as functional community centers may be in short supply. The second point is that Red Cross must follow international and domestic law, as well as the fundamental principles. Freedom of conscience and belief is a protected human right in international and domestic law. And it is also consistent with the fundamental principles. So, for example, in the principle of humanity, we fold into the principle of humanity, as I've spoken in other places, the promotion of human dignity. And we talk about unity, and in the principle of unity it is very much important to affirm diversity. So unity, by its sort of all-encompassing nature, encompasses a diversity of people within the boundaries of a national society and promotes diversity. So the consistency of supporting freedom of conscience and belief is not only about a protected human right, it is, I would argue, consistent with the fundamental principles of humanity and the promotion of dignity, and of unity in the ways that unity promotes diversity. So those are two general points. Firstly, the practice is that it's very common for spaces to be shared between Red Cross and faith-based groups all over the world, as spaces are limited. And secondly, it's not only consistent with international human rights to promote the freedom of conscience and belief, but also consistent with the fundamental principles. With those 2 points made, I would turn to 2 general points. Firstly, sometimes negotiation will be necessary in partnerships. Negotiation of partnerships and space to maintain both independence and the appearance of independence is a separate issue about partnerships, and not just partnerships with faith-based groups. Negotiation is required for partnerships or the use of space with any groups. Finally, the fundamental principles are not only about outcomes, they are also, I would argue, a guide to the way we do things. The manner in which negotiations are conducted should be consistent with the promotion of human dignity in the humanity principle and valuing diversity in the unity principle. I say this because the interactions in some instances have been unfortunately marked by some animosity. In practice, we should be aware of the necessary checks and balances for every partnership. We would not, for example, partner with a business that was promoting the arms trade. However, facilities, for example, should be available for all who support the purposes of the Red Cross movement without discrimination.